The dimensional rift tore reality like wet paper. One moment, the Doomslayer was knee-deep in demon viscera on Urdak's crystalline platforms, super shotgun roaring against the maker abominations. The next, Samuel Hayden's voice crackled through his helmet. Something about containment failure, teleporter overload, catastrophic dimensional breach, and then nothing but screaming white light and the sensation of falling through infinite darkness. He hit Earth hard enough to crater it. The Praetor Suit's shields flared once, twice, then died completely. Warning runes scrolled across his HUD in angry red. Power cells depleted, Argent energy reserves at 11%. Weapon systems offline, except for ballistic arms. The armor had kept him alive through the crossing, but this world had no hell energy to feed on. He was running on fumes. The Slayer pushed himself upright, servos in his armor whining with the effort. Around him, Georgia pine trees burned from the heat of his arrival. Smoke rolled across what had once been a rural highway, now cratered and abandoned. Rusted cars sat at odd angles, doors hanging open like broken jaws. Dark stains painted the asphalt. Dried blood, weeks or months old. His HUD flickered, struggling to analyze the environment. No demonic signatures. No argent radiation. The air tasted wrong, rot and decay, but organic, natural. Whatever had happened to this world, hell hadn't done it. Something moved in the tree line. The Slayer's hand went to his super shotgun, mag locked to his back. The weapon came up smooth, familiar, an extension of his will. Through his visor's damaged optics, he watched a figure stumble from the smoke, human-shaped, a wrong gait. It lurched forward with mechanical hunger, arms outstretched. Not a demon, not possessed, but definitely not human anymore. More emerged from the forest. Dozens. Their skin hung gray and mottled, eyes milky white and unseeing. They moved with singular purpose toward the heat and noise of his arrival. Their mouths opened in silent groans, revealing broken teeth and blackened tongues. The Slayer's finger tightened on the trigger, then hesitated. These things triggered none of his instincts. No hellfire in their veins, no corruption of the soul. They were corpses, animated by something mundane. Disease, perhaps. Biological failure. The walking dead of a world that had already ended. The lead creature, once a woman in a tattered sundress, reached for him with decomposing fingers. He grabbed her wrist and snapped it with minimal effort. The bone broke clean through the rotted flesh. She didn't react to the pain, just kept reaching with her other hand. He shoved her back into the group, watching how they tangled together, how they lacked any coordination or strategy. Pathetic. Demons had cunning, hierarchy, purpose. These things were just hunger. The Slayer holstered his shotgun. These dead weren't worth the ammunition. His gauntleted fist punched through the first one's skull with a wet crunch. The second lost its head to a backhand that contained enough force to pulp bone. The third he grabbed by the throat and tore its spine out through its chest. Old habit, before realizing these creatures didn't have enough sentience to feel terror. They just kept coming. He moved through them like a storm through wheat. A Praetor blade sang from his gauntlet, separating heads from bodies with surgical precision. When they swarmed too close, he simply grabbed and crushed, twisted and tore. His armor's strength enhancement was minimal now, but his own fury-fueled physicality had always been enough. In 30 seconds, 23 corpses lay re-dead around him. The Slayer stood among the carnage, breathing steady, and looked at the devastation of this world with new understanding. No demons, no UAC, no invasion from hell, just humanity, fallen to something so mundane it was almost insulting. He'd fought through literal hell for eons, and this world had been conquered by walking meat. A sound, distinct from the moaning dead, caught his attention. Engine, distant, getting closer. A pickup truck roared around the highway bend. I was swerving around abandoned vehicles. 4 people in the bed, 2 in the cab. They had the lean, hard look of survivors. Weapons bristled from every angle. Hunting rifles, a crossbow, machetes, a fire axe. The truck skidded to a stop 50 yards away when they saw him standing in the crater, surrounded by fresh corpses. For a long moment, nobody moved. The Slayer assessed them through his damaged HUD. Threat level, minimal. Malnourished, exhausted, desperate. The man in the passenger seat, dark skin, hard eyes, katana across his lap, said something to the driver. A woman with short gray hair gripped the steering wheel like a lifeline. One of the survivors in the truck bed, a younger man with a crossbow, stood slowly. His weapon wasn't aimed at the Slayer, but it wasn't exactly lowered either. When he spoke, his voice carried the wary respect of someone who'd seen impossible things. You just killed 20 walkers with your bare hands. The Slayer said nothing. He never did. He turned away from them, scanning the horizon for any landmark that might tell him where, or when, he was. The skyline of a city rose in the distance, buildings dark and silent. Atlanta, if his damaged navigation systems were reading correctly. The crater around him still smoked. "Hey," the crossbow man called out. "Are you military? Where's your unit?" The Slayer started walking toward Atlanta, toward answers, toward whatever remained of this world's civilization. Behind him, he heard furious whispered debate among the survivors. Should they follow? Should they flee? What the hell was he? He didn't care. This wasn't his world. These weren't his people. But standing still had never been an option. Forward. Always forward. Until he found a way home. Or until he found something in this dead world worth the fury that kept him moving. The walking corpses were nothing. The real question was what had reduced humanity to scavenging and fear. And whether they deserved the help of someone who'd spent eternity drowning in blood. The survivors followed him. The Slayer heard their truck crawling along the highway behind him, maintaining distance like a predator tracking wounded prey. Smart. In a world this broken, caution kept you breathing. He'd walked 3 miles when the road curved through what had been a small town. Gas station, diner, scattered houses now overgrown with kudzu and decay. More of the dead shambled between buildings. His HUD counted 17 signatures. They turned toward him with that same mindless hunger, drawn by movement and sound. The Slayer observed them clinically as they approached. Slow, clumsy, but persistent. One wore a police uniform, another a postal worker's shirt. The small blonde child dragging itself across broken glass had been maybe 7 years old. He understood now. This wasn't an invasion. It was a plague. Behind him, the truck stopped. Doors opened. The crossbow man's voice carried across the distance. "We can help you get through them. There's a clear route past the diner if—" The Slayer walked directly into the horde. His fist caved in the first skull. The Praetor blade emerged from his gauntlet with a metallic shing, and he began the work. Fast, efficient, methodical. These things didn't dodge or block. They just walked into death. Head removal was easiest. The brainstem severed. The body dropped. He moved through them like a farmer harvesting wheat, each motion economical. No wasted energy. His suit's power reserves were too low for anything flashy. The child corpse lunged at his leg. He crushed its skull underfoot without breaking stride. 40 seconds. 17 dead. Again. When he turned back, all 5 survivors stood frozen beside their truck. The woman with gray hair had her hand over her mouth. The man with the katana, the one who'd been studying him with tactical interest, now looked at him with something closer to horror. Jesus Christ, someone whispered. The crossbow man stepped forward, weapon lowered completely now. Listen, I don't know what you are or where you came from, but we have a community. Fences. Food. Real walls. You look like you could use... The Slayer's HUD flickered, and a new sound registered. Multiple engines. Heavy vehicles. Coming from the north. His audio sensors, damaged as they were, picked up radio chatter. Movement on Highway 85. Possible survivor group. Bring them in alive if possible. Governor wants fresh. The survivors heard it too. Their body language shifted instantly to combat readiness. The katana man, Michonne, someone called her, wrong gender assumption from his HUD, moved to the front. Raiders, Woodbury scouts, we need to move. Now. 3 trucks roared into view, modified with armor plating and mounted weapons. Men hung from the sides, faces painted with ash and blood. Theatrical, performative. The Slayer recognized the type. Predators who'd found their excuse to become monsters. Every world had them. Hell was full of humans who'd chosen damnation. The lead truck's loudspeaker crackled. Drop your weapons. The governor offers protection, food, shelter. Resist, and we take you anyway. The survivors raised their guns, outnumbered 3-1. The crossbow man, Daryl, someone shouted, aimed at the lead driver. Ain't going to that sick bastard's town. Rather take my chances with the dead. The Slayer stepped in front of them. Daryl blinked. What are you? The raiders opened fire. Assault rifles, semi-automatic pistols, buckshot. The bullets sparked off the Praetor Suit's armor plating, most ricocheting harmlessly. A few punched through where the dimensional crossing had weakened the alloy, drawing thin lines of blood across his arms and chest. His shields were dead. The armor was just metal now. He could be hurt. Good. Rage needed pain to feed on. The Slayer drew his combat shotgun, not the super shotgun, saving those shells, and returned fire. The first raider's chest exploded. The second lost half his skull. The third tried to dive behind the truck and caught a shell that turned his spine into shrapnel. 3 shots, 3 corpses. The raiders had expected scared survivors, and not a walking apocalypse. Light him up! Someone screamed. Concentrated fire. The Slayer charged through it, using the lid truck as cover. His HUD marked targets. 12 hostiles remaining. He vaulted onto the truck's hood, crushing the windshield and the driver's face simultaneously with his boot. The passenger raised a pistol. The Slayer caught his wrist, twisted until bones snapped, then threw the man into his companions with enough force to break ribs. The Praetor blade sang. One raider lost his gun arm. Another found the blade through his sternum. The third swung a baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire. Theatrical weapon, cruel and inefficient. And the Slayer caught it mid-swing, ripped it from his hands, and used it to crush the man's skull. Poetic justice had its place. The remaining raiders broke, unturned their trucks around and fled, leaving their dead and dying behind. The Slayer let them run. He wanted survivors to spread the story. Fear was a weapon. In hell, demons had learned to fear the sound of his footsteps. These human predators would learn the same. He turned back to find the 5 survivors staring at him, with expressions ranging from awe to absolute terror. Michonne's katana was halfway drawn, instinct warring with pragmatism. Daryl's crossbow hung loose in his hands. The gray-haired woman found her voice first. Who are you? The Slayer said nothing. He never did. He checked his ammunition. 16 shells remaining for the combat shotgun, 8 for the super shotgun, then started walking south, away from Atlanta. The raiders had come from the north. That meant their base was north. Woodbury, and the governor, men who preyed on the desperate. He'd met their kind before. Hell had been full of them. Wait, Daryl called after him. You can't just... Those raiders are going to come back with more. And the governor, he's got a whole army. The Slayer kept walking. Damn it. At least tell us where you're going. He paused, turned his helmet toward them. Behind his visor, ancient fury burned cold. Then he pointed north, toward Woodbury, toward the predators. The message was clear. They followed him anyway. The Slayer didn't stop them, didn't help them either. He simply walked north through the Georgia wasteland, while the survivors trailed behind in their battered truck, maintaining a cautious distance. The dead rose from ditches and emerged from abandoned homes, drawn to movement. He killed them without breaking stride, quick, brutal, efficient. The survivors stopped trying to help after the first mile. By nightfall, they'd covered 15 miles. The Slayer's HUD displayed a deteriorating map, fragmentary GPS data, suggesting a town called Macon ahead. Smoke rose from distant fires, human settlement, or just burning ruins. Hard to tell in this world. When he finally stopped at the shell of a warehouse, the survivors pulled their truck inside behind him. Defensive position. Smart. Daryl killed the engine and the group climbed out, weapons ready, watching him like he might detonate. "All right," Daryl said, working his jaw. "We're here. You saved our asses back there. Least you can do is tell us what the hell you want with Woodbury." The Slayer checked his ammunition. 15 shells left for the combat shotgun, 8 for the super shotgun. Not enough for an army. He'd need to scavenge from the raiders he'd killed, recover their weapons, adapt to this world's limited resources. "He doesn't talk," Michonne said quietly. She'd been studying him the entire journey, warrior recognizing warrior. Not once. Not even when those bullets hit him. "Yeah, I noticed he bleeds too," said a younger man with a sheriff's hat. Rick, they called him. Leader type. Haunted eyes that had seen civilization collapse. "That armor's tough, but it ain't invincible. You go after the governor with 15 shells, you'll die. He's got 40, 50 fighters, walls, machine guns." The Slayer turned to face them fully. His helmet's red visor reflected the dying light. "You saw what those raiders were doing," Rick continued. "Taking people, women especially. The governor runs Woodbury like his personal kingdom. Food, power, safety, all his to give or take away. People inside those walls don't even realize they're prisoners." "Some do," Michonne said darkly. "They just can't leave." "So why march straight into that?" Rick stepped closer, despite obvious fear. "Brave, stupid. Both. Even if you're some kind of super soldier, you can't fight an army alone. You'll need..." The Slayer's gauntlet shot out, grabbing Rick by the collar and lifting him effortlessly off the ground. No threat. Just demonstration. Rick's feet dangled 6 inches above concrete. The other survivors raised weapons instantly. Crossbow, katana, rifles. But none fired. They understood the math. If he wanted Rick dead, Rick would be dead. The Slayer held him there for 3 seconds, then set him down gently. Deliberately. Gentle. Making a point. Rick coughed, rubbing his throat. Okay, I get it. You're strong enough to do this alone." He paused. "But you're low on ammo. I saw you counting. And those raiders are going to tell the governor about you. He'll be ready." The Slayer tilted his helmet, listening now. "There's a sporting goods store 2 miles east," Daryl offered. "Cleaned out mostly. But there's a gun safe in the back we couldn't crack. You look like you could manage it. Shotgun shells, rifle ammo, and maybe some explosives if we're lucky. Tactical information. Useful." The Slayer nodded once. "And we know Woodbury's layout," Rick said. "Weak points in the walls. Guard rotation, where the governor keeps his guests." His voice turned bitter on that last word. "Michonne escaped from there. She knows every inch." Michonne's jaw tightened. "I also know what he does to people. What he is. You want to kill him? I'll help draw his guards away. But I want to be there when he dies." The The Slayer studied her. Pain behind those eyes. Trauma. A debt owed in blood. He understood debt. Hell had owed him for an eternity. He'd collected. "So here's the deal," Rick said. "We help you gear up, give you intel on Woodbury, maybe cause a distraction so you can get inside. In exchange," he paused, "in exchange, you help us get people out. Oh, the prisoners, the ones who don't want to be there, before you bring his walls down." The gray-haired woman, Carol, spoke up. "There are children there, families. They didn't choose the governor. They just needed safety." The Slayer's HUD flickered across their faces. Exhausted. Desperate. Good people trying to survive in a world that punished goodness. They'd seen him kill without hesitation, and still they asked for mercy. For others, not themselves. Humanity. Even here, in the ashes, some of it remained. He walked to the warehouse wall and used his Praetor blade to carve a single symbol into the concrete, a circle with a horizontal line through it. His mark. The rune demons had learned to fear in hell's deepest pits. "What's that mean?" Daryl asked. The Slayer tapped the symbol, then pointed north, toward Woodbury. Then he drew his finger across his throat in a universal gesture. "Clear message. The governor dies." Then he pointed to the survivors, made a pulling motion toward himself, and pointed to a different direction. Evacuation route. "You'll get the civilians out first," Rick translated, understanding dawning. "Then kill him." The Slayer nodded once. "And those raiders who ran?" Michonne asked. "The ones who saw you?" The Slayer made a crushing motion with his fist. All of them. No survivors among the predators. Only the prey would be spared. Daryl actually smiled, mean and sharp. "Brother, I think I'm starting to like you." "We move at dawn," Rick said. "Get you armed up, scout the perimeter, find the best entry point." He extended his hand. "Fair warning, the governor's survived this long because he's smart. Ruthless. He'll have a plan for someone like you." The Slayer looked at the offered hand for a moment, then shook it. Brief. Firm. A contract sealed. Rick's group had no idea what they'd just unleashed on Woodbury. The governor thought himself a king of the apocalypse, but the Slayer had killed god-kings in hell, had torn through armies of demons that made human raiders look like children playing soldier. Woodbury had preyed on the weak long enough. Now the prey had teeth. The sporting goods store was a gutted corpse, shelves empty, windows smashed. But Daryl had been right about the safe. 300 pounds of reinforced steel, combination lock destroyed by someone who'd tried and failed to crack it. The Slayer gripped the edges and simply tore the door off its hinges. Metal shrieked. The locking mechanism shattered. Inside, jackpot. Boxes of shells, buckshot, slugs, birdshot, 4 boxes of .45 ACP, 2 hunting rifles with scopes, a compound bow, 3 boxes of broadheads, and tucked in the back, someone's paranoid fantasy, 2 blocks of C4 with detonators. "Holy shit," Daryl breathed. The Slayer loaded methodically. Combat shotgun maxed, super shotgun fully stocked. He strapped additional shells to his suit's magnetic hardpoints, muscle memory from 1,000 battlefields. The C4 went into his equipment pouches. 1 rifle he kept. The other he handed to Rick. "We got enough firepower now," Rick said. "Question is how we use it." Michonne unrolled a hand-drawn map on the dusty floor. Woodbury's walls are sheet metal and wood, reinforced at key points. Main gate here, always guarded, at least 6 men. The governor's apartment is center town, 2nd floor above the command post. He keeps prisoners in the old rec center, northwest corner. She traced a route with her finger. Guard towers every 100 feet, searchlights at night, patrols inside every 30 minutes. Population's maybe 70 people total. 40 civilians, 30 fighters loyal to the governor. "Loyal or scared," Carol corrected quietly. "Doesn't matter in a firefight," Michonne said. "They'll shoot." The Slayer studied the map. Y1UD recording the layout. His tactical systems were damaged, but functional enough for basic analysis. Multiple entry points. The northwest wall, near the prisoners, showed thinner construction. Weakest structural point. The guard tower there had limited sight lines into the adjacent buildings. He tapped that section, then held up 3 fingers. 3 in the morning. Darkest hour. Guard fatigue at peak. Hit them when they're sleeping, Daryl nodded. Smart. We'll need a distraction, Rick said. Something to pull guards away from the rec center. If you go in loud, they'll execute the prisoners before you reach them. The Slayer pointed to the southeast corner, opposite side of town from the prisoners. Then he mimed an explosion. You blow something on the far side, draw the guards that direction, and then we slip in and get the civilians out the northwest. Rick frowned. That splits us up. If something goes wrong. The Slayer's helmet swiveled toward him, held his gaze. Rick saw something there behind that visor, absolute certainty. This wasn't the Slayer's first extraction, wasn't his first siege. Hell itself had fallen to this creature. Right, Rick said. You've done this before. So we're really doing this, Carol said softly. Attacking Woodbury. The governor's had that town locked down for months. Anyone who's tried to fight him ends up dead or worse. Michonne's expression went cold. Good. Let him try worse on that. She nodded toward the Slayer. They spent 2 hours planning. The Slayer absorbed every detail. Guard rotations Michonne remembered. The governor's patterns Rick had learned from refugees. And structural weak points Daryl identified. His HUD compiled it all into tactical overlays. Limited processing power, but enough. As night fell, Carol distributed canned food from their supplies. She offered the Slayer a can of beans. He waved it off. His armor had bio-sustenance systems. They were running on backup power, but they'd keep him alive. These people needed the food more. You really don't eat? Carol asked. The Slayer had eaten. Once. Before he'd become this. Before the divinity machine. Before hell. That felt like 1,000 lifetimes ago. Now he was fury given form. Hunger was for things that could still die. He turned away, checking his weapons again. Familiar ritual. Every shell counted. Every shot had to matter. Hey, Daryl said, approaching with his crossbow. Those things you killed back on the highway, the walkers, and you just crushed them. Didn't even hesitate when that kid came at you. The Slayer knew where this was going. The moral question. The humanity test. That don't bother you? They used to be people. The Slayer had killed billions. Demons, yes. But before that, before hell, the memories were fuzzy, burned away by rage and time. He'd been human once. Maybe he'd killed humans too. He didn't remember, didn't matter. The dead things walking this world weren't people anymore, just meat, animated disease. He met Daryl's eyes through his visor and shook his head once. No hesitation. No mercy. Not for the walking corpses. Not for the predators like the governor. Daryl studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Yeah, all right. Just needed to know what you are. He paused. Why, you're the monster we point at other monsters. The Slayer tilted his helmet slightly. Close enough. Good, Daryl said, 'cause Woodbury's full of them. At 0200 hours, they moved out. The truck stayed behind. Too loud. They traveled on foot through the Georgia darkness. The Slayer's damaged night vision barely functional, but his natural senses sharp enough. 2 miles through walker-infested territory. The dead rose from the shadows. The Slayer killed them silently. Praetor blade through skulls. Necks snapped with practiced efficiency. Rick's group moved well for civilians. Quiet. Disciplined. Survivors who'd learned or died. At 0245, Woodbury's lights appeared through the trees. Searchlights swept the perimeter. Voices drifted from guard towers. Inside those walls, predators slept soundly, confident in their power. They had no idea what was coming. The Slayer checked his C4, set the timer. 30 minutes. Rick gripped his shoulder. 3 a.m. We get the civilians out the northwest. You do what you do. The Slayer nodded once. Then he disappeared into the darkness, moving toward the southeast wall. The governor's kingdom had 1 hour left to live. The southeast corner of Woodbury erupted in a fireball that turned night into day. The explosion tore through a supply warehouse, sending flames 50 feet high. Screams erupted. Bells clanged. Searchlights swiveled toward the inferno as guards poured from barracks, half-dressed and panicked. The Slayer was already inside. He'd scaled the northwest wall 30 seconds before detonation, Praetor Suit's strength compensating for damaged servo systems. The guard tower there stood empty. Both sentries had abandoned post to see the explosion. Undisciplined. Fatal mistake. He dropped into Woodbury's streets, HUD mapping the town in real time. Rec Center northwest, 200 yards. The governor's apartment central east, 300 yards. 45 heat signatures moving chaotically toward the fire. An 18 signatures stationary, likely prisoners and the sleeping. Rick's voice crackled through a salvaged radio on his belt. We're at the northwest wall. Civilians are scared but moving. Need 2 more minutes. The Slayer moved through shadows toward the rec center. 2 guards stood outside, rifles raised, watching the chaos, not looking behind them. He crossed 20 feet in absolute silence, Praetor blade emerging. First guard died with the blade through his spine. Second turned, mouth opening to shout. The Slayer's gauntlet crushed his throat before sound emerged. Inside, 30 people huddled in the dim space. Women, children, elderly, malnourished, bruised. They recoiled from him in terror, this armored figure dripping blood. A woman in her 40s stepped forward, shielding a child. Please, we didn't do anything. The Slayer raised one finger to his helmet. Silence. Then he pointed to the back door. Freedom. Go. You're helping us? Confusion crossed her face. He grabbed the door and tore it off its hinges. Outside, Rick's group waited in the shadows. Carol waved urgently. The prisoners hesitated, then ran. Children crying, adults stumbling. Free. Thank you, the woman whispered as she passed. The Slayer was already moving. The governor would be mobilizing his real fighters now, not the panicked mob at the fire. He needed to end this before organized resistance formed. Unknown hostile in town, a voice boomed over loudspeakers. All units converge on the rec center. Shoot to kill. Too late for stealth. The Slayer turned toward the town center and started walking. Combat shotgun up. HUD marking targets. Sizix fighters rounded the corner. Body armor, assault rifles, tactical formation. Professional. The governor's inner circle. They opened fire on sight. Bullets sparked off his armor, 3 punching through weakened sections. Pain flared across his ribs. He returned fire. The combat shotgun roared 4 times. 4 fighters dropped, chests obliterated. The 5th took a shell to the face. The 6th turned to run. The Slayer's Praetor blade punched through his back and out his sternum. Reload. Move. More came. A dozen fighters, converging from multiple directions. The Slayer ducked into a building, someone's looted home, as bullets shattered windows. He grabbed an overturned table, threw it through the front wall into 3 fighters. Wood and bodies crashed together. He followed through the gap, super shotgun thundering. 2 shells, 3 dead. A fighter tackled him from the side. Strong, desperate. Knife aimed at his helmet's seal. The Slayer caught the blade barehanded, metal screaming against his gauntlet, then headbutted the man hard enough to cave in his skull. Fall back! Fall back to the governor's position! They were breaking, running. The Slayer pursued. His HUD flickered. Power at 7%. Armor systems failing. But his body didn't need the suit. The suit just made it efficient. The town square opened before him. Central fountain, dead and dry. The governor's apartment building loomed beyond, lights blazing. 20 fighters formed a defensive line. Sandbags, mounted machine gun, rifles. Behind them stood a man in a long coat, eye patch over one eye, pistol in hand. The governor. Even through damaged optics, the Slayer recognized the type. Charismatic. Cruel. A man who'd found his power in apocalypse and would burn the world to keep it. "So you're the demon my boys warned me about," the governor called out, voice carrying. "Hell of an entrance. Literally." He smiled, cold and calculating. "But you made a mistake coming here. This is my town. These are my people. And nobody takes what's mine." The Slayer said nothing, just kept walking. "Light him up!" The machine gun opened fire. Concentrated fire from 20 rifles. The Slayer dove behind the fountain as rounds chewed through stone. His shields were dead. His armor was failing. This was the kind of firepower that could kill him. Good. He preferred a challenge. He primed the second C4 block, set timer for 10 seconds, and hurled it over the fountain. The explosive arced through the air, trailing wire. The governor's eyes went wide. "Now scatter." The blast tore through the defensive line. Sandbags exploded. Bodies flew. The machine gun flipped end over end. In the chaos, the Slayer vaulted the fountain and charged. His super shotgun roared. 2 fighters evaporated. The Praetor blade took another's head. A rifle butt swung at him. He caught it, broke the weapon, then broke the wielder. Thunder and blood, fury and physics. A fighter got lucky. Knife found the gap in his armor at the shoulder joint. Blade sank 3 inches deep. The Slayer grabbed the man's wrist, twisted until bone shattered, then threw him into 2 others. Pain was just information. Information he ignored. 15 seconds. 11 dead. The survivors ran. Only the governor remained, backing toward his building, pistol up. "You think you've won? You think killing me changes anything?" He laughed, a bitter and manic. "This world's already dead. I just made it honest." The Slayer walked forward. Pistol shots pinged off his helmet. He grabbed the governor by the throat, lifted him off his feet. The governor's eye went wide with primal terror. "Wait." The Slayer didn't wait. Never had. Never would. The sound of breaking bone echoed across the silent square. The governor's body hit the ground with a wet thud. For a moment, Woodbury was silent. Then, slowly, doors began to open. Faces appeared in windows. Civilians, the ones who'd been trapped here, who'd lived under the governor's rule because the alternative was starvation and the dead. They stared at the armored figure standing in the square, surrounded by corpses, covered in blood that wasn't entirely his own. A woman emerged from a nearby house, hands raised. Is he really dead?" The Slayer turned his helmet toward the governor's broken body, nodded once. "Oh God." She sank to her knees. Relief or shock, maybe both. Others emerged now, a dozen, then 20. Not fighters, just people. "What do we do now?" The Slayer had no answer for that. He'd killed the Predator. The prey would have to figure out survival on their own. He started walking toward the northwest wall, toward where Rick's group had evacuated the prisoners. "Wait!" A man ran forward, younger, wearing mechanics' coveralls. "You can't just leave. The governor's men, the ones who ran, they'll come back. Or worse things will come. We need..." The Slayer kept walking. "We need protection. Someone to..." He stopped, turned. His helmet's red visor focused on the mechanic with an intensity that made the man step back. Then the Slayer pointed at the man's chest, then at the other civilians gathering in the square. Then he swept his arm across Woodbury's walls. your town, your protection, your responsibility. You want us to defend ourselves? The mechanic's voice cracked. Half of us don't even know how to shoot. The Slayer pointed at the weapons scattered across the square. The rifles. The ammunition. Then he pointed at the walls. Then at the dead fighters. Learn from the dead, or become them. Simple equation. An older man with gray beard spoke up, voice steady. He's right. We got comfortable letting the governor do the thinking, the fighting. That made us prisoners. He picked up a rifle, checked the chamber with practiced hands. Military, maybe. Before. Time we remember how to stand on our own feet. The Slayer nodded approval, then continued toward the wall. Outside, Rick's group had moved the freed prisoners a quarter-mile into the forest. 43 people huddled together, children crying softly, adults in shock. Carol was distributing water. Michonne stood watch, katana drawn. Daryl's crossbow tracked the tree line. Rick looked up as the Slayer emerged from the darkness. You're hit." The Slayer glanced at his shoulder where the knife had penetrated. Blood seeped slowly through the compromised armor seal. He'd had worse. Hell had done worse to him daily for eons. "The governor?" Michonne asked, voice tight. The Slayer made a twisting motion with his hands. Neck snap. Dead. Something fierce and satisfied crossed Michonne's face. "Good. His fighters?" Rick pressed. The Slayer held up his fingers, counting down. 23 corpses in Woodbury's streets. 8 fled into the night. 15 unaccounted civilians armed themselves and claimed the town. "You left them alive?" Daryl frowned. "The civilians?" The Slayer nodded. Not soldiers. Not predators. Just people who'd made bad choices to survive. He killed demons, and those who served them willingly. The desperate and the scared weren't his targets. "That's generous," Rick said carefully. "More than the governor would have done." Carol approached with medical supplies. "Let me look at that shoulder." The Slayer waved her off. His armor's biosystems were already flooding the wound with coagulants and combat stimulants. It would seal in minutes, heal in hours. His body had been built to endure. "So what now?" Daryl asked. "We got 40 people who need shelter, food, safety. Woodbury's got all that. But you just killed its leader, and most of its fighters." The Slayer looked at the freed prisoners, exhausted, traumatized, but alive. Then at Woodbury's distant lights. Resources, walls, safety. Everything they needed. He pointed at the prisoners, then at Woodbury. New leadership, different rules. "You want them to go back?" Carol shook her head. "After what they went through there." The Slayer knelt, picked up a stick, and drew in the dirt. Circle representing Woodbury, stick figures inside. He drew walkers outside the circle. More walkers. Always more. Then he drew other circles, other survivor groups. Drew arrows pointing at Woodbury from multiple directions. Raiders, predators. Nature abhors a vacuum. "He's right," Rick said quietly. "We leave Woodbury empty. Someone worse than the governor moves in. Or the walkers overrun it. Either way, those supplies get lost." He looked at the freed prisoners. "But if they take it back, make it theirs. A fresh start," Michonne finished. "Without a tyrant." The woman who'd thanked the Slayer stepped forward. "Some of us lived there before the governor took over. It was ours once. Could be again." She looked at the others. "If we're brave enough to try." The older military man emerged from the group. "I'll help organize defenses, real ones, not the governor's cult of personality. Democratic guard rotations, everyone pulls weight." Others nodded, slowly, fearfully, but with growing determination. The Slayer stood. His work here was done. Woodbury would survive or fall on its own merits. He'd removed the cancer. They had to heal themselves. "Where will you go?" Rick asked. The Slayer looked south. His HUD still flickered with fragmentary dimensional readings, searching for any trace of the rift that brought him here. Somewhere in this dead world, there might be a way home. Or not. Either way, standing still wasn't an option. Forward. Always forward. "You're welcome to stay," Rick offered. "Help us build something. A real community. Sunk, you're a hell of a fighter." The Slayer shook his head. He wasn't a builder. He was a weapon. And this world had other predators that needed killing. He checked his ammunition, 7 shells left, and started walking into the darkness. Behind him, Daryl's voice carried, "Crazy bastard. Saved us all and just walks away." "Some people aren't made for peace," Michonne said softly. "They're made for war." The Slayer disappeared into the Georgia night, leaving Woodbury's future in its people's hands. The dead world continued turning, and he continued walking. 3 days of walking brought the Slayer to the outskirts of Atlanta. The city rose like a tombstone against the gray sky. Skyscrapers dark and hollow. Streets choked with abandoned vehicles and the wandering dead. His HUD estimated 10,000 walkers in the metropolitan area. Maybe more. He'd learned their patterns. They congregated in urban centers, drawn by residual noise and the ghost of human activity. Hordes forming and reforming, flowing through streets like slow-motion rivers of decay. Individually pathetic, collectively dangerous. His ammunition situation was critical. 3 shells for the combat shotgun, 5 for the super shotgun. He'd scavenged what he could from Woodbury's dead, but this world's resources were finite. Every bullet spent was one less available. He'd need to adapt, conserve, fight smarter. The Praetor blade would have to do most of the work. He entered Atlanta from the north, moving through collapsed highway overpasses. Walker clusters turned toward him, dozens at first, then hundreds. They funneled between concrete barriers, moaning that endless hunger. The Slayer let them come close, then moved. The blade sang, heads separated from bodies in clean arcs. He'd perfected the economy of motion over eons. Minimum energy, maximum lethality. His damaged armor whined with each movement, servos struggling, but his own strength carried the weight. 1 walker, 2, 5, 10. They fell like wheat before a scythe. A runner, fresher corpse, still retained some speed, lunged from his blind spot. The Slayer caught its throat mid-leap, slammed it into the pavement hard enough to crack concrete, then crushed its skull with his boot. Or as efficient, brutal, necessary. 200 walkers dead. 17 minutes. He pushed deeper into the city. His HUD flickered with a new signature. Artificial structure, power source active. Impossible. Atlanta should be dead. He altered course, following the reading through downtown streets thick with corpses. The signal originated from a massive building. Looked like a CDC facility. Concrete reinforced, heavy blast doors. And lights. Actual electric lights shining through reinforced windows. Something alive was inside. The Slayer approached the facility's exterior. Walkers covered the grounds, thousands of them, pressing against the walls, clawing mindlessly at metal that wouldn't yield. They sensed life inside, food denied. They'd been here for months, maybe longer, wearing grooves into the concrete from endless movement. The main entrance was completely blocked. The Slayer circled the building, HUD scanning for alternate access. A loading dock on the east side, metal shutter sealed, but showing heat signatures behind it. Someone inside. Multiple someones. He grabbed the shutter and pulled. Metal groaned. His armor's servos screamed protest. The shutter buckled, then tore free with a shriek that drew every walker within 2 blocks. He ducked inside as they converged, pulled the shutter closed behind him, or what remained of it. Emergency lights illuminated a concrete corridor. Clean, sterile, climate-controlled. His thermal sensors picked up movement deeper in the facility. Armed personnel, taking defensive positions. Expected. He'd just torn through their secured entrance. "Freeze! Drop your weapons!" 6 soldiers emerged from cover, body armor, assault rifles, flashlights mounted. Real military, not raiders playing dress-up. They flanked him professionally, covering angles, fingers on triggers. A woman's voice echoed over speakers. "Identify yourself immediately or we will open fire." The Slayer stood motionless. His helmet's visor reflected their flashlight beams. "I said identify." The speaker paused. "Jesus Christ, what is that armor?" "That's not military issue. Not anything I've ever seen." One soldier edged closer, rifle trained on the Slayer's head. "Sir, you need to remove that helmet. Slowly. And explain how you got through our perimeter." The Slayer's HUD analyzed the situation. 6 rifles. Unknown number of additional personnel. Limited ammunition on his end. He could kill them all, probably. But that wasn't why he'd come. And he'd followed the power signature seeking answers. Resources. Possibly a way home. Fighting served no purpose here. Slowly, deliberately, he unclipped his combat shotgun and set it on the ground. Then, the super shotgun. The soldiers tensed, but didn't fire. He raised his hand slightly. Compliance. Cooperation. "Smart move," the woman's voice said. "Corporal, secure his weapons. Everyone else, maintain distance and cover. If he moves wrong, light him up." A young soldier approached nervously, gathering the shotguns. His eyes went wide at the weight. "Ma'am, these weapons, I've never seen anything like this design. And this armor, it's—" "Bring him to decontamination," she ordered. "Full quarantine protocol. I want to know what we're dealing with before it gets anywhere near the lab." The soldiers formed up around him, our weapons trained. One gestured down the corridor. "Move, slowly. Any sudden moves and we drop you." "Clear." The Slayer walked forward, escorted deeper into the CDC facility. The air was temperature-controlled, filtered. This place still functioned, still had power, still maintained some fragment of the old world's order. Rare. Valuable. They passed through multiple security checkpoints, blast doors, biometric scanners, decontamination chambers. The facility was a fortress, designed to withstand contamination, outbreak, apocalypse. It had succeeded where the world had failed. The corridor opened into a vast laboratory space, computers still running, generators humming, equipment monitoring something. A woman in her 40s stood waiting, lab coat over tactical gear, pistol on her hip. Gray streaked her dark hair, so authority and exhaustion lined her face in equal measure. "I'm Dr. Sarah Holt," she said, studying him with scientific curiosity, tempered by military caution. "Acting director of what's left of the CDC. And you?" She circled him slowly, examining his armor. "You're either the luckiest survivor I've ever seen, or you're something else entirely." The Slayer said nothing. "Let's start simple," Dr. Holt continued. "Where did you come from? And what the hell are you doing in Atlanta?" The Slayer's HUD flickered across the laboratory equipment, the active computers, the research data scrolling on monitors. He pointed at the screens, then at himself, then made a questioning gesture. Dr. Holt's eyes narrowed. "You want to know what we're working on?" He nodded once. She studied him for a long moment, then made a decision. "All right. You came all this way through a city of the dead. You clearly want answers." Her expression hardened. "But fair warning, what I'm about to show you might make you wish you'd stayed outside." Dr. Holt led him deeper into the CDC facility, soldiers maintaining escort positions. They passed laboratories filled with microscopes, centrifuges, specimen chambers containing Walker tissue samples. Scientific equipment the Slayer recognized from UAC facilities, Different purpose, same desperate search for answers. The outbreak started 14 months ago, Dr. Holt explained, pulling up data on a massive display screen. Infection vector unknown, mortality rate 100%, reanimation time 3 minutes to 8 hours depending on cause of death. Images scrolled past, cellular breakdown, neural degradation, microscopic footage of the pathogen consuming living tissue. The Slayer studied the data. His HUD attempted analysis, but lacked the biological processing power. This wasn't demonic corruption, just disease. Natural selection gone wrong. We've been working on a cure since the beginning, Dr. Holt continued. 18 researchers, now down to 6. The rest? She gestured vaguely toward the city outside. We've tested hundreds of compounds. Nothing stops the infection once it takes hold. Nothing reverses reanimation. The dead stay dead. She pulled up another screen. Global satellite imagery showing darkness spreading across continents. Communications went down 9 months ago. We've had no contact with other facilities for 6 months. For all we know, we're the last scientists left alive. The Slayer pointed at the equipment, then made a questioning gesture. Why continue? Because giving up means extinction, Dr. Holt said simply. Someone has to try, even if it's hopeless. She studied him. You understand that, don't you? Fighting even when the war's already lost. He did. Hell had been unwinnable. He'd won anyway. A younger researcher burst into the room, tablet in hand. Dr. Holt, we've got a problem. The breach this individual created attracted a massive horde. Estimate 3,000 walkers converging on the east loading dock. The damaged shutter won't hold. Seal that section, Dr. Holt ordered. Emergency bulkheads. Vent the corridor if necessary. Ma'am, if we seal it, we lose our secondary exit. We'll be trapped. Dr. Holt's jaw tightened. She turned to the Slayer. You led them here. Intentional or not, you've compromised our security. We can seal the section and survive, but we'll never leave this building alive. The hordes will wait forever. The Slayer walked to the display showing the loading dock security feed, on 3,000 walkers and counting, pressing against the damaged shutter. Metal was already buckling. They'd breach within minutes, flood the corridor, and reach the inner facility within the hour. He pointed at the feed, then at himself, then made a cutting motion across his throat. You want to fight 3,000 walkers? The corporal who'd taken his weapons laughed bitterly. That's suicide, even with that armor. The Slayer held up one finger. 1 hour. He pointed at Dr. Holt, then at the rest of the facility. Seal yourselves inside. Then he gestured to the loading dock. He'd handle the rest. You're insane, Dr. Holt said. But she was considering it. Desperate situations required desperate solutions. Even if you somehow survive, what's your angle? Why help us? The Slayer pointed at the research data on the screens. Then he mimed opening a door. Information exchange. He needed their knowledge, their equipment. In return, he'd buy them time. You want access to our research? Dr. Holt studied him. What could you possibly do with viral pathology data? The Slayer's HUD had been scanning their systems since he'd arrived. Their computers interfaced with communication satellites, dimensional mathematics in their quantum processing subroutines. Basic compared to UAC tech, but present. These researchers might have the knowledge to help him locate dimensional anomalies. Ways home. He pointed at satellite imagery, then at himself, then made a gesture indicating distance. Far away. Different place. Dr. Holt's eyes widened with understanding. You're not from here. Not from this world. She laughed, exhausted and amazed. Of course. That armor, on those weapons, the way you move, you're from somewhere else. Somewhere that didn't fall to this plague. He nodded once. And you think our systems can help you get back? Another nod. That's... She ran calculations mentally. Theoretically possible. If dimensional barriers exist, if our quantum processors could detect rifts... She shook her head. It's insane. But no more insane than the dead walking. The metal shutter in the loading dock groaned. Walkers were breaking through. "Decision time, Doctor," the corporal said. "Seal the section or let him try." Dr. Holt looked at the Slayer. This armored warrior from another world who'd torn through Woodbury, who'd walked through Atlanta's hordes, who stood ready to face 3,000 walkers alone. Madness or salvation? Maybe both. "Give him his weapons back," she ordered. Ma'am, that's an order, Corporal. If he wanted us dead, we'd already be dead." She turned to the Slayer. 1 hour. You keep them off our door. We'll give you full access to our systems, help you find your way home." She extended her hand. "Deal?" The Slayer shook it. Brief, firm. Contract sealed. The corporal reluctantly returned his shotguns. The Slayer checked ammunition. 3 shells combat shotgun, 5 super shotgun. Not enough. Not nearly enough. He'd need to improvise. He walked to a supply closet, found industrial cleaning supplies. Alcohol, bleach, ammonia. He grabbed a dozen bottles, his HUD calculating chemical combinations. Not C4, but it would burn. "Oh God," a researcher whispered. "He's making incendiaries." The Slayer loaded his remaining shells, secured the chemical bottles to his belt, and headed toward the loading dock. Behind him, Dr. Holt ordered the facility sealed, emergency bulkheads sliding into place, creating a barrier between the laboratory and the compromised section. The shutter burst open just as he reached the corridor. Walkers poured through like a flood of rotting meat, filling the space with bodies and the stench of decay. 3,000 hungry dead, and 1 very angry man from hell. The Slayer ignited the first bottle and hurled it into the mass. Fire bloomed, walkers screamed their mindless hunger, and the Doomslayer went to work. The corridor became an inferno. Burning walkers stumbled forward, spreading fire to those behind. The Slayer moved through the flames, Praetor Suit's heat shielding barely functional but enough. His blade cut through smoke and flesh alike. Heads rolled, bodies collapsed. The ones that burned kept crawling until he crushed their skulls. 3 shells left. He fired twice, center mass into clusters, buckshot tearing through multiple targets. Walkers fell in groups. The 3rd shell he saved. Always. Save one. A massive walker, former linebacker, still wearing shredded football pads, charged through the fire. The Slayer sidestepped, drove his blade through its temple, then used the corpse as a battering ram against the others. Dead flesh was just another weapon. His HUD counted kills. 200, 300, 500. The numbers climbed, but so did the pressure. More walkers poured through the breached shutter, climbing over burning corpses, relentless and endless. The corridor was only 30 feet wide. They couldn't all attack at once, but they didn't need to. Time was their weapon. Exhaustion. Attrition. The Slayer hurled another firebomb. Flames washed over the horde. His armor's temperature warning screamed. Metal was heating past tolerance. The damaged sections were beginning to fail. He could feel heat through the breaches, searing his skin. Pain. Good. Rage fed on pain. A walker grabbed his leg. He'd missed one crawling beneath the bodies. Teeth sank toward his ankle joint. The Slayer drove his boot down, shattering its spine, then stomped until the skull pulped. No time for precision, only efficiency. 1,000 dead. The corridor was choked with corpses. They created barriers, slowing the horde's advance. The Slayer used them, stacked bodies into improvised walls, created choke points, turned the environment against the enemy. Hell had taught him that every battlefield was a weapon if you were creative enough. His final combat shotgun shell went into a cluster at 1,500 kills. The super shotgun thundered 4 times, 5 shells, 4 shots, conserving that last round. Always one left. 1,800 dead. Only blades now. Only fists. Only fury. A walker lunged. The Slayer caught its head and twisted. Vertebrae separated with a wet snap. Another came. He drove his armored elbow through its face. 3 more surrounded him. He grabbed one's arm, tore it free, and used the limb as a club to beat the others down. And his armor's right shoulder servo failed completely. The arm hung heavier now, mechanical assistance gone. He compensated. Muscle memory from before the suit, from when he'd been just a man with a gun and too much anger. That man was still inside, still capable. 2,000 dead. The pile was 6 feet high now. New walkers climbed over their fallen, slavering and mindless. The Slayer stood atop the mound, king of a corpse mountain, blade dripping and gauntlets wet with gore. His HUD flickered, power at 2%. Systems critical. Armor was becoming a liability, dead weight pulling him down. He couldn't remove it. Not here. Not surrounded. He'd die in seconds. Forward. Only forward. He waded back into the horde, blade singing, fists crushing, boots stomping. Every movement cost more. His wounds from Woodbury had reopened. Fresh blood mixed with old. The walker that had bitten toward his ankle had cracked the armor seal. Not infected. The Praetor Suit's biofilters were still functional, but compromised. 2,300 dead. The horde was thinning. The shutter held more bodies than walkers now. The ones still pressing forward climbed mountains of their own dead, slipping on gore, slow and clumsy even for corpses. The Slayer's right arm wasn't responding correctly. Nerve damage or armor failure didn't matter. He fought left-handed, blade in his good hand, using his damaged arm as a shield. Walkers bit at the armor. Teeth shattered on reinforced plating. Broken teeth couldn't spread infection. 2,700 dead. His vision was narrowing. Blood loss or exhaustion or both. The Praetor Suit stimulants had run dry 10 minutes ago. He was operating on pure will now. Same thing that had carried him through hell's endless armies. Will and rage and the refusal to stop. A walker tackled him from behind. Must have climbed the wall somehow. They went down together into the corpse pile. More swarmed. 6, 8, a dozen. Tearing at his armor, searching for flesh, finding gaps. Teeth scraped metal, nails clawed at seals. The Slayer exploded upward, throwing bodies in every direction. His blade found throats, eyes, skulls. He ripped and tore with both hands now, damaged arm functional again through sheer adrenaline. Or maybe he'd gone past pain, into the place where the body just obeyed, because stopping meant death. 3,000 dead. The counter hit its estimate, but more were coming. Always more. The horde outside hadn't stopped, wouldn't stop. I would never stop until every walker in Atlanta had tried and died. His HUD died completely. Power gone. No tactical display. No threat detection. Just his natural senses against the infinite dead. He'd fought like this before. Before the suit. Before the technology. Just a man and his rage against hell itself. The Slayer grabbed the last firebomb, lit it with sparks from his damaged armor, and threw it directly into the shutter entrance. The explosion collapsed part of the loading dock ceiling. Concrete and rebar crashed down, sealing the breach, crushing dozens of walkers, creating a barrier of rubble and fire. Temporary, but enough. He stood in the burning corridor, surrounded by thousands of corpses, armor smoking, body screaming, and surveyed his work. The horde outside clawed at the rubble. They'd get through eventually, but not in the next hour. The emergency bulkhead behind him cycled open. Dr. Holt stood there, face pale with shock. My God, you actually, all of them. The Slayer took one step toward her. Then his legs gave out. He crashed to his knees, armor grinding against concrete. Blood pooled beneath him, his blood, not the walker's. Multiple breaches, multiple wounds. The Praetor Suit's biosystems were offline. Nothing to stop the bleeding now. Dr. Holt shouted orders. Soldiers rushed forward. They caught him as he toppled sideways. The last thing he saw before darkness was data scrolling on a distant monitor. Dimensional calculations. Satellite readings. Answers. Maybe. The Slayer woke to sterile light and the steady beep of medical equipment. His armor was gone. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt air against skin. They'd stripped him down to treat his wounds. 17 separate lacerations, 3 cracked ribs, severe burns across his right arm, and enough blood loss to kill 3 normal men. He sat up. Pain flared, but he ignored it. A young medic nearby jumped. Jesus, you shouldn't be. Lay back down. You need at least another. The Slayer swung his legs off the medical table and stood. His body protested, but obeyed. The medic backed away, calling for Dr. Holt. She arrived within minutes, tablet in hand. You've been unconscious for 6 hours. Most of your wounds are still open. Stitches won't hold if you... She stopped, seeing his expression behind the scarred face. A determination that made flesh wounds irrelevant. Right, of course. You're not exactly normal, are you? He wasn't. Hadn't been for a very long time. Your armor's being analyzed, Dr. Holt continued. The technology is beyond anything we've seen. Self-repairing alloys, biointegration systems, power sources we can't even identify. It's decades, maybe centuries, ahead of our science. The Slayer held out his hand. Give it back. We will. But first, I owe you answers. She pulled up data on her tablet. While you were fighting, we ran dimensional scans using your armor's residual energy signature as a baseline. Found something interesting. She displayed a map of the eastern United States. A pulsing red dot marked a location in Virginia. Quantum fluctuation detected here. Massive dimensional instability. It's faint, but it matches the theoretical signature your armor would have left when crossing into our world. His eyes locked onto the location. A way home. Maybe. There's a problem, Dr. Holt said carefully. The site is in D.C. Commonwealth territory. Highly organized survivor community. 50,000 people. Functional government. Military force. But they're territorial. Paranoid. Shoot first. Question never. Getting in there won't be easy. The Slayer had stormed hell itself. Paranoid humans didn't concern him. There's more, she continued. The fluctuation is degrading. Our models suggest it'll collapse completely within 2 weeks. After that, she met his eyes. After that, you're stuck here. Permanently. 2 weeks, 14 days to cross Virginia, infiltrate the Commonwealth, reach the dimensional rift, so I'd hope it was stable enough to send him home. Hope Samuel Hayden or someone was still looking for him. Hope hell hadn't consumed everything in his absence. A lot of hope for someone who'd long since stopped believing in it. Dr. Holt handed him a data stick. Everything we found. Coordinates, readings, theoretical models for stabilizing the rift. It's not much, but it's all we have. She paused. I also loaded our viral research. All of it, in case you ever encounter something similar in your world. He took the data stick, nodded once. Thanks. Your armor's in the equipment bay. We cleaned it, patched what we could with our limited materials. It won't be at full capacity, but it'll function. She smiled sadly. You saved us. Bought us time to finish our work, maybe find a cure. Least we could do is help you get home. The Slayer dressed in silence, his armor feeling lighter now, or maybe he was just weaker. The Praetor Suit systems hummed at 15% power. Better than nothing. His weapons were cleaned. What little ammunition remained carefully loaded. The CDC had no shells to spare. One round in the super shotgun, his last bullet. Always save one. In the equipment bay, the 6 remaining researchers had gathered. The corporal stood with them, weapon lowered. "Sir," he said formally, "it's been an honor." The Slayer nodded. These people were still fighting when the fight seemed lost, still searching for answers when none existed, still human when humanity seemed extinct. They deserved to survive. Dr. Holt opened the main facility doors. Outside, Atlanta sprawled, dead and silent. The horde had dispersed and are drawn away by distant sounds. The path north was clear. For now. "The Commonwealth," Dr. Holt said. 200 miles north. You'll face worse than walkers. Raiders, warlords, desperate people who'll kill you for your armor. And if you reach the Commonwealth, their military won't just let you walk in." The Slayer checked his blade, still sharp, still ready. "One more thing," she added quietly. "If you find a way home, what happens to the people you've helped here? Woodbury. Us. Will you remember them?" He looked at her, held her gaze. He'd remember. The Slayer remembered every battle, every ally, every world he'd fought to save. This dead earth would stay with him, like hell stayed with him, like every realm he'd bled for. Some things rage couldn't burn away. He walked into Atlanta's corpse-filled streets, nor heading north toward Virginia, toward the Commonwealth, toward the dimensional rift that might send him home. Behind him, the CDC's lights remained on, a single point of hope in a dead city. The walkers turned toward him as he passed. He ignored them unless they got close, conserving energy, conserving ammunition. The journey ahead would be long, dangerous, probably impossible. He'd done impossible before. Somewhere in the ruins, a radio crackled to life. Salvaged technology picking up distant broadcasts. A voice, distorted but audible. Commonwealth military frequency. All survivors proceed to designated zones. Unauthorized entry will be met with lethal force. This is your only warning. The Slayer adjusted his course north and kept walking. The dead world continued turning. The Commonwealth waited, unaware of what approached. And somewhere beyond dimensional barriers, hell still burned, and Samuel Hayden still searched, and the Slayer's war still raged eternal. But here, in this moment, on this dead earth, one impossible warrior walked alone through an impossible wasteland, chasing an impossible way home. Some things never changed. Forward. Always forward. Until it was done. The Doomslayer's passage through the Walking Dead universe left permanent scars. Woodbury rebuilt under new leadership, free from tyranny. The CDC continued its research, bought time by one warrior's fury. Survivors across Georgia spoke in whispers of an armored demon who killed the dead and the wicked with equal efficiency. He didn't belong to their world, never had. But for a brief, violent moment, he'd been exactly what they needed, a force of nature that reminded humanity what it meant to fight back, to refuse surrender, to stand against the endless dark with nothing but rage and will. The dimensional rift in the Commonwealth beckoned. Whether it would lead home or deeper into the multiverse remained unknown. But the Slayer would reach it, would test it, would rip and tear through whatever stood between him and answers. Because that's what he did. What he'd always done. What he would always do. The Walking Dead had learned to fear the sound of his footsteps. Soon, the Commonwealth would learn the same lesson hell had learned eons ago. Some things are too angry to kill, too determined to stop, too furious to ever rest. The multiverse was vast and full of horrors, but it had never encountered anything quite like the Doomslayer. His war continued, across worlds, across dimensions, across the infinite dark between realities. And somewhere, in every universe he touched, something monstrous learned to be afraid. May the Force be with you. More stories await.